Mark Swenson, and we're going through how to win your sexual abuse lawsuit. This is episode 9. We're going to talk about experts. How do you find them? You can find them on the net. You can go to a law library and they will have books of who's testifying as an expert. LexisNexis and Westlaw maintain libraries of this sort of thing, or you can go to organizations such as, which is a little more expensive, but you can get very quickly some very good experts from TASA. The experts need to be researched. You need to find out if anybody has impeached them. You need to know how well qualified they are, and most especially you need to know if they're really good experts in terms of being an advocate. There's nothing worse than putting somebody up on the stand and having defense counsel tear him into little pieces and he doesn't know what to do. That does happen. You don't want it to happen to you. You're going to spend a lot of money on experts in these things, mostly on psychiatrists and psychologists, and you are going to want to make sure you get your money's worth. The impeachment of experts is usually done by saying how much money they make being an expert, and it's a big business for some of these guys. They make millions of dollars advocating for one side or another. This is especially true of defense experts. The defense experts will say, he's not harmed. He was harmed but he's okay now. He was harmed by something else. And those are really the big choices, or he will get better in the future. You know, those are what a defense expert is usually going to say. There are other kinds of experts, experts on physical evidence, for instance, but what you are mainly going to be dealing with in this kind of litigation is a psychologist. The psychologist is going to be your advocate. The psychologist is going to guide you. The psychologist is going to offer a professional opinion not only on damages but on the cause, and even as to whether or not the sexual assault actually took place. So it's important to get a good one, somebody who is experienced in this. The psychologists should give you a report. The report should detail everything about the victim. The most common result of a sexual assault is PTSD. In the book, we go through the criteria for PTSD in the DSM-5, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5. And everything a psychologist is going to tell you in terms of a diagnosis is going to be keyed to the DSM-5. The National Institute of Mental Health has withdrawn support for the DSM-5 and has tried to substitute its own publication, which is called Research Domain Criteria, RDOC. So you need to know that DSM-5 is not brought down from Sinai if you have to attack it. But in general, psychologists are not going to do anything that isn't in the DSM-5. They just use that as either their Bible or their dictionary, whatever you prefer. You're going to want to get your own objective tests. The MMPI-2, Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory 2. It's the most widely given objective test in the world, psychologically. Can it be challenged? Yes, it can. But there are, usually you just want to say, well, you know, psychologists don't like this for this reason or that reason, and then go on to something else that you think is more valid. Judges are not going to want to spend day after day challenging the MMPI. The MMPI has validity tests. There are in it a number of questions which are similar and should be answered similar. Some questions are phrased in a way that is opposite, and they should be answered in the opposite way. You strike out on too many of those and it invalidates the test. They also have a really horrible little part called the fake bad test. And the fake bad test is to check on people who are malingering or exaggerating. And they put that in as a nod, as a favor to insurance companies. Nobody who likes you is going to give you the MMPI-2. Your psychologist, for purposes of treating you, of giving you help, is very seldom going to give you an MMPI-2. They can tell what they need to tell without going through that kind of expense. If they don't like you, if people don't like you, they'll give it to you. It's usually used as an employment screen or to try to sink plaintiffs in personal injury litigation. The big thing is the interpretation. Do not get the kind of MMPI that is computer scored with a computer assessment. You can get one for about $250, and the temptation is to get that because getting a real psychologist to go over it and give you an interpretation is going to be $2,500, $3,000 to $5,000. And so you want to save the money. Don't save the money. Get a real MMPI-2 scored by a real live psychologist who specializes in that. And do it to yourself. If you don't do it to yourself, the other side will do it to you, and the interpretation will not be as favorable. Believe me, the other side has experts, and those experts are hired to sink you. They're not going to be honest, they're not going to be fair, they're not going to help you, they're not going to give you a good diagnosis, they're just going to try to sink your case. All right, so get your own MMPI-2. Same thing with a Rorschach test. The Rorschach test is the ink blot. So you hold you up an ink blot and you say, oh, it looks like a butterfly, or whatever it is. It does have scores for things like PTSD. Mostly people see things like explosions or blood or violence in it, things like that, or it reminds them of something that has happened to them. But there is no statistical validity to it. There is an attempt to give statistical validity to it. I get into it in the book. Of a couple of different scales that they have, that they try to have statistical validity, but it is so widely used and so widely respected by psychologists, you're just going to need one, and give it to yourself. Have your own psychologist give it to you preemptively. Same thing with the MMPI-3, which is another test, grew out of a professor's notebook. It's a little more homegrown than MMPI-2. But you're going to want to have it. Those are the big three tests. There are a bunch of other tests that the psychologist may give. I get into it in the book. Read that, have your psychologist give the appropriate tests, or have them given, and then give you a report on it. All right, that's going to be very necessary when we get into settling the case. Memory. As we've already said previously, sexual trauma can really put your brain in a blender. It can really screw things up. How do you know who you are? When you woke up this morning, how did you know who you are? Memory. But if your memory has been screwed up because your brain has been trying to wall off trauma, then you may not remember exactly who you are or exactly what happened. Your brain's been trying to wall off this trauma, and it screws up your memory, okay? If there's a question of false memory, talk to your psychologist about it and use their guidance. Hypnotherapy. You can disqualify a witness by hypnotizing them on this subject, and then they're not able to talk anymore, not able to testify. Make sure when you take someone to a psychologist to help you with the case, tell them, don't hypnotize this person. There are also physical experts, physical evidence experts. The physical evidence experts mainly work for the police or have worked for the police, and you may be able to get them for free or for nominal rates by having the police involved. If there's physical evidence, you should get the police involved. There are experts for standards of such things as daycare or schools to keep the schools safe. You may use some of them. Economists may be able to help you outline damages. There are police experts. Sometimes you can get a police officer qualified as an expert to give an expert opinion on things as, did the crime happen? You know, who is responsible? These are extremely important things that you may be able to get into testimony or threaten to get into testimony through experts, right? Next time, we'll talk about negotiations.